Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dangerous Ideas. I'm Lee Camp. Thanks for being here. I have an excellent show for you. I'm going to get in a little later. I'm going to get into Stephen Donziger's analysis, as well as others, that over 300,000 have been murdered in Gaza, which is not the number we generally hear. And I'll discuss where that math and that evidence comes from. We'll be getting into that. We'll be getting into a documentary called The Settlements. Also, one of the main Jeffrey Epstein accusers has, according to the mainstream media, taken her own life over the weekend. Pretty significant updates there. Yeah, a lot going on. So please click thumbs up, click subscribe. But the first thing I'd like to discuss is the thing I'm most excited about. I have on the show author Charlotte Dennett, and let me pull up the book here. Follow the Pipelines is the book that has just come out, uncovering the mystery of a lost spy and the deadly politics of the great game for oil. This book is excellent and important, and I'm excited right now to speak to Charlotte Dennett. Hello.
Hey, hi. We finally made it. Yay.
Well, yeah, we finally made it work after after weeks of coordinating. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Sure.
An important book, and you've spent years, if not decades, it seems, researching what basically to sum it up in a certain way, what happened to your father. Your father working with I guess it was just the beginnings of the CIA. They were kind of formed the same year as his plane went down, I believe. The
Uh,
CIA.
Actually, he was still with the Central Intelligence Group, which
Okay.
was followed the OSS, the wartime spy, and yeah, right before the CIA was created.
Right. The OSS became the CIA. And anyway, I'm sure I could do a great job butchering it, but if you want to give a little synopsis of the story of your father, and what people can expect to learn from this book.
Yes. My father, my father was head of counterintelligence. He was America's first master spy in the Middle East. He got formal training in Washington. He got training in London. Kim Philby, the famous spy, was one of the people who trained him. And then he was sent to Lebanon. And I'm glad you got the book up there. It's really important. It's full of maps, by the way. Maps tell a story, just the way pictures can say 1,000 words, so can maps. And if you look on this, you will see a dotted line that goes from sort of south to north. That is the projected route of the Trans-Arabian Pipeline. And my father's last mission was to try to determine the route of this pipeline. And no small thing, because there's always the worry about sabotage or hostile tribes or so on. And so one of his key jobs was to make sure that it was going to terminate in a safe area. And the two places that were considered, get this,
Mm-hmm.
Lebanon or Haifa, Palestine. So this is in 1947. The World War II is over, and the great game is on. So that what I learned in investigating his last mission was this pipeline was huge, huge. Why? Because of the U.S. had an exclusive concession in Saudi Arabia,
Mm-hmm.
and it was going to pipe the oil to Europe, which was, suffering after World War II. And the whole idea was to break the communist controlled coal unions and feed oil as the major energy into Latin America. Into Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And it succeeded. It was part of the Marshall Plan. And this pipeline and Saudi oil turned the U.S. not only as a major power in the Middle East, but in the whole world. But mind you, what I learned is our former allies were exceedingly jealous. They wanted to have more of a hold in Saudi Arabia. They did not succeed. But at any rate, that got me started because that Trans Arabian pipeline, I learned, was running into trouble with the Syrians. It was a nationalist government. And the first CIA coup that was ever conducted, it was not in Iran, it was in Syria. They overthrew the Syrian president, Kouatly, who was a nationalist. He didn't want it to terminate in Palestine because he was against the creation of a Jewish state. And mind you, this was coming very soon.
Yeah, 47, 48, when the UN
Yeah.
votes to basically create Israel. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what happens is my father died in a plane crash. We could get into that. But who succeeded him? Get this. Archie Roosevelt and Kim Roosevelt, they were cousins and grandsons of Teddy Roosevelt, the president. So anyway, they replaced him. They were behind the coup that got rid of Kouatly, and then the pipeline was able to pass through Syria, through the Golan Heights, by the way. Some people will know what that means. And it eventually terminated in Lebanon, but very close to the Syrian border, the Israeli border. So that got me going. The one thing that really got me going, I sued the CIA, and one of the
hold on, I just want to let people know where you're coming from. You're how old were you when your father died?
6 weeks. I was 6 weeks old. I was,
Yeah,
I was a baby. It was only later. I was a journalist in Lebanon, and I got shot at during the beginning of the Civil War and decided, I think I'll go home for a while, sit this one out for a while.
Yeah, so 6 weeks old, and your father's plane goes down, and you obviously find out about it later when you've grown up a little bit. But and you've kind of always wondered as a kid and then a young adult what really happened to your father's plane. And it's not even clear, I guess, initially why he was on this flight or what he was actually doing there. And so you've spent many years trying to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, I did. And I think I have some pretty strong leads. I'll leave it for those who want to read the book, but I have some ideas of who was responsible. By the way, plane crash is a great way to assassinate people because they're really hard to figure out how it happened, who was involved, and so on. And that's the case here. But I sued the CIA, got a lot of documents, but there was this one document that just blew my mind. It was called an analysis of work, and it was him regurgitating his marching orders before he heads to Lebanon. And this would be in September 1943. And he talks about what are we going to be concerned about, and right up on the top, Saudi oil. And he says the reserves are so huge, we must protect them at all costs. And why I emphasize at all costs is then, as I begin to develop this theme, I realize that protecting the oil at all costs becomes a meme throughout America's, if I may say, sordid history of its Middle East policies for 70, over 70 years.
Yeah.
It was protecting all these endless wars. Don't kid yourself. They're all about oil.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I mean, not that I understand everything about this, but I think that in those years, in the 40s and 50s, it was about access to oil. Like you said, the Saudi reserves at that time, they didn't know about a lot of the other oil reserves that we've since found. They didn't know at the time that Venezuela is sitting on more oil than anyone else, et cetera. But then in the 50s, they create Bretton Woods, which makes the dollar the reserve currency. Then in the 70s, it's separated from. It's in the 70s, they realized they have to pin the dollar outside of gold because they've left the gold standard. So they have to pin it to something. And so Kissinger and a few others come up with the idea of pinning it to oil, the world's largest commodity. So then all this oil that was already incredibly important becomes even more important because without the petrodollar, the U.S. cannot print kind of endless amount of money, can't have $1 trillion a year military budget. And so it becomes incredibly important that oil keeps pumping, that it pumps in US dollars, and that the countries that are outside of that system that want to pump oil outside of US dollars are very problematic. And those countries tend to be the ones that we do the most destruction in: Iraq, Syria, Libya. So all of this is connected. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's another angle to it as well. Oil is the fuel of the military. And that is another reason why you never hear about it. I defy anyone to tell me a mainstream story that has described the crisis in Gaza or Ukraine or even Iran. They don't talk about the oil.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the great lessons of World War I and World War II was that Germany lost both wars because they ran out of gas. It's just as simple as that. So any country that aspires to be a superpower wants to go out and get the oil and prevent the other guys from getting the oil. And in fact, this was all explained, believe it or not, found at the crash site was a book. The plane took off from Saudi Arabia and crashed in Eritrea. It was on its way to Ethiopia. It was another oil mission. And at the crash site was this book called This Fascinating Oil Business. In fact, I have it right here. This fascinating oil business at the crash site. And this guy describes it. He describes it's secretive. It's incredibly monopolistic. And anyway, I got some great quotes from the book. But that's the other dimension. And you put the two together and you begin to see, why oil is so important, why Trump is still going out drill, baby, drill. And could you put the picture again of the cover? Yeah, now look at that. You see, there's two other pipelines there, if you'll notice. That is the Iraq Petroleum Pipeline, IPC. That was built in the 30s after World War I, but it was conceived in the immediate aftermath of World War I in 1917. Getting the oil of Iraq was a quote unquote first-class war aim. That's what Churchill said. And the reason was he had just converted the British Navy's reliance on coal and converted it to oil. But Britain didn't have any oil. And he predicted he would have to go out on a sea of troubles to get oil. Well, they went after Iraq. Then they conceived this pipeline. And one of the things that I'm arguing is you've got to reanalyze the creation of the Balfour Declaration, 1917, that the British approved of creating a Jewish state in Palestine. And that's often cited as sort of the building block for when Israel is going to be created in 1948. And I mean, of course, Zionism was very powerful at the time. Jews were persecuted. This is before the Holocaust. And where were they going to go? Well, the founder of Zionism, Herzl, he understood geopolitics. And if he was going to get Britain behind this idea of a Jewish state in Palestine, he had to talk about their imperial interests. And he mentioned where Palestine was located, right on that Eastern Mediterranean. So it was a critical location, and it was the terminal point of the Iraq Petroleum Pipeline. So you've got to look at the whole creation of a Jewish state in a geopolitical perspective, and then you understand. And what I really come to argue is let's elevate the conversation above the Arabs versus Jews, even though I mean, it's decades of struggle and conflict. So yes, it's complicated, but the real people we should be looking at are the people on top who are really running the show.
Yeah.
And Kissinger once said, if you control the oil, you control the world, and he's right.
And so much of this has to do with the Middle East in general, and Israel, as various U.S. heads of state have called it, is an unsinkable battleship for the United States in that region. So
exactly.
Even just in that way, it's the U.S. will never back down from allowing Israel to do just about whatever it wants.
That's true, but now there's the new dimension too. Since 2000, they discovered vast amounts of oil and natural gas in the Mediterranean.
Off Gaza. Yeah.
Yeah, $500 billion worth. Okay. And there have been previous incursions into Gaza by Netanyahu. And the whole idea, one was in 2009, the other was 2014. A lot of people killed, but nothing like the current war. And the whole idea was to prevent the Gazans from having a claim on the Gaza Marine, where so many of these oil and gas reserves exist. Of course, they're all throughout the whole Mediterranean. It's not just off Gaza. And you know, Biden was going around sending his it was called a gas whisperer. Adam Hostile was being sent out to negotiate with Lebanon to see if they could work out a border deal with Lebanon. The whole scheme is to turn this area into an energy corridor, to extract the oil and gas and then ship it off to energy hungry Europe, which suffered after the sabotage of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline,
Yeah,
the Russian
I
pipeline.
don't know what happened to that Nord Stream. I think it's just just an accident.
Oh, yeah, right. Just an accident, just like
Yeah.
all of these things.
Well,
Yeah.
and that gives a huge motivation for why the United States did not want this Nord Stream pipeline to suddenly bring cheap Russian fuel straight into Europe just on a daily basis. The U.S. and could never compete energy-wise with that. So the Biden and others had been saying for years before, at least a year, maybe two, prior to when Russia went into Ukraine, that they were going to stop the Nord Stream pipeline. And
Yeah.
Biden has that famous quote where they say, "How are you going to?" The reporter says, "How are you going to stop it? It's not, it's not your territory." And he just smiles and says, "We have our ways."
Oh, yeah. And it was the first thing they did after the invasion, by the way. That was the first sanction against Russia.
Yeah.
He convinced Germany not to let it go online. There are two pipelines. One was already there. This was the second Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And Europe was already 40%. 40% of its gas and oil came from Russia. And the US didn't want them to have more. So that was the first sanction leveled against Russia after the invasion. They convinced Germany not to put the Nord Stream 2 online. It was all set to go during that summer, and they convinced Germany not to do it. And then, of course, months later, it mysteriously blew up. So these
And
explosions, I'll tell you, there's
and
reason to.
and just
Go ahead.
to reiterate, this is not just that you make a lot of money from oil, because you can make money from other things. China makes a lot of money from selling handbags. You can make money from other things, but with oil, if Russia is selling, completely supplying Europe's energy and then switches to rubles, which ultimately they did because of the sanctions, but all of a sudden the petrodollar is heavily weakened, and
Yeah,
as that continues to progress around the world,
right.
it facilitates de-dollarization, which means, again, the United States cannot print endless money, which is the secret to our empire and to being able to afford 900 military bases around the world, etc. I know you.
They're all connected.
In the moment we'll wrap up here in a few minutes, but in the moment before we went live, you mentioned the Wesley Clark's quote of 7 countries in 5 years. Can you talk about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, well, exactly. That was right after the Iraq War when he was famously confronted by a Pentagon official from Rumsfeld's office. And he said, and I will quote real quickly just to remind people um, that the Pentagon had plans to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq, moving on to Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Iran. The Iranian's the only one that hasn't been crippled by civil wars, efforts at regime change. And if you look at any one of those countries and you put the name of the country and oil, you'll see what it was all about.
And 2 notes about Iran. One is that the U.S. has heavily succeeded in greatly decreasing the amount of Iranian oil that they can export because of sanctions, which they've done that successfully to both Iran and Venezuela. and prior to that, Syria. So they do it economically, even if they don't do it by assassination. But then you also have the fact that President Raisi's helicopter went into a mountain a year ago, and no one seems to know why. But
and then there was this huge explosion in the Iran's major port. Now, who's responsible for that? Who would want that to happen? Just like who would want the explosion to happen in the port in Lebanon? The Lebanese all suspect Israel. There were people, eyewitnesses, who said they saw Israeli planes fly overhead right before the explosion. But that's the port explosion in Lebanon is like our 9/11. We can't get answers. They still don't know who did it, and it's going to take a while to figure out this port explosion. But I'm sure, the Iranians have long memories. They knew that their country was overthrown by the CIA in 1953, and they haven't forgotten that. So
just,
you're messing with people with long memories.
I'm just pulling the Iran headline up on the screen here. Explosion kills 65. Yeah. This was just the other day this happened.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. Trump's going to Saudi Arabia in 2 weeks. I just learned. That's going to be interesting. But the main thing that they're working on now, it's called the India Middle East Corridor, and it's going to connect India, go underneath the sea and the Gulf, and then cross Saudi Arabia and terminate in Haifa. And it's going to be a two-way pipeline. There's a great map. I'm working on an article right now, and that's the plan. It's all energy, and they won't say it. Instead, Trump talks about his Riviera. Okay, well, I am sure there's some hotels that'll be built there too. But the whole idea, you flatten it, because no bank will finance an infrastructure project like this if there's conflict. So what do? You get rid of the conflict. You wipe them out. You demilitarize them. You move them off. That's what's going on. And why hasn't the U.S. been more aggressive in trying to prevent this? Because they're involved.
Oh, yeah.
The United States is all part of this.
A shipment of weapons under Biden and continuing under Trump goes to Israel every 36 hours to rain down on children. So.
And Chevron's working big time in the Mediterranean. At least some people are now, like the United Methodists, put out a flyer, a petition to boycott Chevron because it's fueling the war. They've got it. They get it. But I have to tell you, I'm really appreciative that you've let me on the show today, because the mainstream media and even some progressive, fairly progressive liberal magazines, they won't touch the subject. They just won't. They won't go near it. So,
yeah, I mean, that's both amazing and doesn't shock me at all.
Right. Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much, Charlotte, for coming on. Here's the book again. It's called Follow the Pipelines. You can get it at chelseagreen.com.
And Amazon.
And Amazon and all the others, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you
your local bookstore. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and keep in touch, and great work.
Thank you, Lee. Thanks.
Absolutely. All right, Charlotte Dennett, cool interview and excellent book. So check it out if you get a moment. But actually, it's a good segue that we wrapped up there at the end with Chevron, because all of you know of Chevron's probably most famous political prisoner. I mean, I don't know how many political prisoners Chevron has, but Stephen Donziger, who was put on house arrest for several years, basically for winning a case against Chevron. And anyway, this story is not about that, but instead about Gaza. And Stephen Donziger has posted a updated estimate of how many have been murdered in Gaza by Israel's genocide. And that estimate is over 306,000 people, 14% of Gaza's population. And here's how they come by these numbers. And by the way, everyone, please click thumbs up, click share, everything you can do to help get us to help us defeat the censorship that, of course, makes it very difficult to get these stories out to people. But, you know, we do our best every day. Anyway, here's from Stephen Donziger's Substack. There is a solid evidentiary basis to conclude that since the Hamas raid on October 7th, at least 306,000 people in Gaza have been killed by Israel directly or died indirectly. And of course, indirectly is still murder. When you cut off the food to an area of the world that you control the doors of, the ins and outs of, you cut off the food, cut off the water, and people then die due to that. That is still murder. If you lock someone in your basement and you don't shoot them, but you starve them to death, you didn't not kill them. It's still murder. And anyway, he says directly or indirectly as a result of the destruction of the healthcare system and its refusal to allow in adequate levels of food, water, and medicine. That number is far higher than the official count of the Gaza Ministry of Health. Now, most of you know the number of the Gaza Ministry of Health. It's over 51,000 now. Maybe it's even over 52,000 now. But that number is two things. One, it only counts direct death. So someone killed by a missile, by a bomb. It does not count starvation or, other medical problems that cause death. And furthermore, it does not count the people that are missing under the rubble, that they just have no idea what happened. So it's not counting a lot of things. And by the way, I know that there's some people who are true propagandists, like the one on Joe Rogan, Douglas Murray, who says, oh, those numbers aren't accurate because it's the Gaza Ministry of Health. Actually, every time that the Gaza Ministry of Health's numbers have been checked following skirmishes, conflicts, following Israel's aggression in the past, they have always been accurate, if not an undercount. So many, including the UN, many organizations have looked into Gaza's numbers and they've always been accurate. So it's bullshit to just say, oh, Gaza's reporting false numbers. Anyway, Stephen Donziger says, my calculation suggests that 14% of the enclave's estimated pre-conflict population of 2.1 million has been killed either directly or indirectly. The British, and here's how he came up with that number. The British medical journal, the Lancet, you remember this number. I covered it back in June about how they found that 186,000 Gazans had died directly or indirectly. That was back in June. We're coming up on another June. So we're almost, for those of you trying to figure out the math at home, we're not far off from a year from when the 186,000 number was first given to us. So we know that 186, and now it's a peer review and medical analysis, etc. This means that an average of 654 people died every day since the conflict began until June 19th of last year. 654 murders a day if you count starvation and lack of water and the lack of medical treatment, etc. But by the time that June 19th came around, which is when Stephen Donziger did this analysis. Why did he stop at June 19th? Because that's when the last ceasefire began. So the fewer people died during that ceasefire. So instead of bringing it up to today, he stops it at January 19th. To January 19th, if you take those days and with the analysis that 654 Gazans die a day, you get that number, 306,000 murdered by Israel since this began. And it's now even higher than that because, again, that only counts up to January 19th. So, and rather try and guess beyond that, I'll just say over 300,000 Gazans have been murdered by Israel since October 7th. And again, if you need me to keep repeating this, this is the dictionary definition of a genocide. It's the dictionary definition of ethnic cleansing. You can literally pull up the definition on the Holocaust Memorial Fund website, and you will check off every single detail of whether this is a genocide. So anyone who tries to argue otherwise is really grasping at straws. It is possible that the rate of death dropped in the last few months compared to the beginning of the conflict, but it's also possible that it rose, given the long-term impacts of famine and lack of medical care, along with the continued Israeli bombing campaign. And of course, this is how famine works, right? They're now, I brought you a story the other day of how Gazans are now down to one meal a day, most of them. And who is famine going to kill quickest? It's going to kill the babies and children, young children, and the elderly. And of course, that's going to get worse and worse as time goes on, because the stores of food in Gaza are going to decrease every single day. And Israel has not allowed anything to go into Gaza since they ended the last ceasefire. So the famine deaths are just getting worse. They're ramping up heavily. And I wanted to bring you this story because it just shows how the numbers we're being told are just way off. 300,000 is not a number that is given on your mainstream media, your dumpster fire mainstream media. It's not a number you even hear from most independent journalists. Many of them do not talk about how this is likely 300,000 or more. Instead, they just pin the number at 52,000 or whatever the Gaza Health Ministry is saying. Okay, so definitely wanted to bring you that story. I have several other stories connected to Israel that we're going to get into. We're also in a few minutes going to get into Virginia Giuffre, or Giuffre, I guess is how they say it's pronounced, and how she has supposedly committed suicide. Some details of that. Perhaps Epstein's, I'd say pretty definitively Epstein's most famous accuser, along with Prince Edwards. I don't even know who that is. Prince Andrew. Anyway. But I wanted to play this clip. Please click thumbs up, everybody. Click share. Let people know. New episode of Unredacted tonight comes out Thursday. Also, get ready for that. But okay, I wanted to bring you this video. There's a new documentary out called, I think, The Settlers. Let's see, it doesn't. Yeah, The Settlers. It's actually on BBC, which sounds pretty impressive because the BBC has done. Israeli forces are trying to get it removed, but BBC has done just a really spectacular job of propaganda for Israel over the years. So I guess every once in a while something sneaks out that actually tries to tell the truth. Anyway, this documentary called The Settlers, and Settlers is a euphemism, in case you need to know. It's a euphemism for land pillagers, land rapers, those who steal land from Palestinians are called settlers. Speaking of settlers, we got a little update on Christopher Columbus coming up as well. But anyway, here is, I think it says towards the end of the documentary. I have not seen the documentary, but it's towards the end of the documentary. And it really says what the Palestinian says. I think they're in the West Bank or near the West Bank. I'm not even sure, but says to the BBC journalist is really interesting about what their life is like. They're basically trying to film. This BBC crew is trying to film, and you'll see what happens.
Something's happening. What is it? It's the soldier. Are they coming in?
For those of you listening to the podcast, it's nighttime. He's trying to interview people, and Israeli soldiers have pulled up.
They are screaming to us.
And they know the laser with the guns.
Now they see green lasers through the window, which are the aims. Those are the laser aims of the rifles.
That's a laser on the rifles. תקשורת זרה.
It's happened most.
He's yelling. What he just yelled in Arabic is, or maybe Hebrew. I don't know. Is foreign press.
Every day.
What do we do? Just stay in here?
Yeah, we are inside.
Matan, what do you think?
It's not safe at the moment. There's obviously multiple guns pointing at us.
Yeah, let's wait.
I assume that's their minder. Usually you have a person with you who's supposed to help you navigate these situations, and so the BBC guy asks him what he thinks, and he goes, "Not safe. People are pointing guns at us." Yeah, you think?
What can we do? Can we call the police?
Which police? I mean, they are one regime.
This doesn't worry you.
No, because I mean, we raised in this situation, so it became a normal reality for us. When you are a kid, you just see this army invading your home in the day, on the night. You grow up on this injustice reality that it became normal for you as a human, but it's not normal for anybody, and no one should accept it.
I think you could probably understand that, but the BBC guy asked the Palestinian if why he wasn't nervous, and he said, "Well, this doesn't make me nervous because this is every day. This is what we face every day. We have guys pulling up, pointing guns at us every day, and it just becomes normal." I can't imagine what it's like to live that life. I can't imagine having people and knowing that they could kill you at any moment, and there's going to be no justice. Like in the United States, yes, there are a lot of people killed with guns in the United States. But there's this idea that if someone were to walk up to you with a gun, there's still this idea that there's a high likelihood that person's gonna go to prison, something's gonna happen to them, someone's gonna look into who murdered who. In the occupied territories, if the IDF walks up to you, you know that if they were to kill you, there would be no real investigation. There would be no concern for who did the murder. No one's going to prison. No IDF soldier is going to be, he's going to find himself locked up because he murdered an innocent person. None of that. They can just kill with impunity, and many of them do. And obviously in Gaza, they do on a daily basis. But anyway, just to see this little interaction of this is the normal reality. Normal reality for us. And anyway, I want to get to well, let's see. Did I have a little more on Israel real quick? I wasn't sure. Oh yeah, I forgot. This is what I wanted to cover. I am a target. I've recently become a target of the Canary Mission. For those of you who don't know, the Canary Mission is this horrific pro-genocide organization, and they've been going since far before October 7th. But their main focus, I think, initially was to go after students who were protesting Israel prior to October 7th, even, going back several years. They would tell organizations, they would tell, funders at universities, they'd tell the heads of universities, look, this person is anti-Semitic, this Palestinian group is anti-Semitic, they say that Israel's a problem, and many times the school, thinking, oh my God, we've got anti-Semites here, or being corrupt themselves, would do something to those students. They'd, kick them out of school. Other people would harass them. It was kind of doxing anybody who dare stand up against Israel. And that was their goal. Now, since October 7th, I think Canary Mission has gotten even more active on kind of going after everyone. And they accuse anyone who says this is a genocide, anyone who says you can't just bomb babies and it's fine. They go after them and say they're anti-Semitic. Anyway, they took a clip of me and Katie Halper. I was on Katie Halper's show recently. Me and Katie go way back. Anyway, many of you know, both Katie and I are Jewish. We are Jewish folks. And anyway, here's what Canary Mission said about the clip. Watch quote-unquote journalist Katie Halper and quote-unquote comedian Lee Camp normalize Jew hatred in America. By the way, the Canary Mission is so anti-Semitic. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Claiming Ben Shapiro is, quote, looking more and more like Hitler and other anti-Semitic, quote-unquote jokes, which, anyway, let me play the clip first and then I'll analyze it. But I put up a video mocking Ben Shapiro. People pointed out he's looking more and more like Hitler. Have you noticed that?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
there's something creepy going on there. I mean, maybe,
something even creepier than what's already going on. Yeah.
maybe beliefs start to manifest themselves in your face or something. Then they created some weird thumbnail. I don't know. But anyway, people were saying this. I actually didn't say this. I did a clip on Unredacted tonight of Ben Shapiro. I didn't say anything about Hitler, but a lot of people in the comments were saying he's looking more and more like Hitler because his mustache is thicker in the middle for some odd reason. And anyway, but why are we discussing Ben Shapiro? We're discussing him because he endorses genocide. He acts like this is all fine and great. And it really is the most repulsive kind of thing. Absolutely disgusting human being with no moral core. And so that's why we're making fun of him. And I mentioned that many people have said he's looking like Hitler. Canary Mission calls this an anti-Semitic joke, but they do not want to tell anyone that Katie and I are Jewish because that would ruin their little bullshit. So instead, they pretend that this is just, anti-Semites being anti-Semites. Totally laughable, totally repulsive. And they intentionally mislead people in order to try and, harm us, try and get people to go after me and Katie. But the other thing in a larger sense that the Canary Mission does is they actually increase anti-Semitism. The Canary Mission, much like AIPAC, much like so many of the Israel lobby, works very hard to conflate Judaism with Israel, which causes people who are kind of uninformed to conflate everything Israel does with everything the Jews do. These are two different things. There are many anti-Zionist Jews. There are many Jews who are actively and in a vehement way opposed to genocide in Gaza. But of course, if you conflate the two, if you think they are one and the same, then you cannot understand that. And so Israel's worked very hard to get people to conflate the two. The Canary Mission works hard to get people to conflate the two. AIPAC works hard to get people to conflate the two. They want you to not understand that there's a difference there because they want you to think that any criticism of Israel is a criticism of all Jews. But furthermore, as I've said many times, but not in connection with Canary Mission, by diluting anti-Semitism, by pretending that anti-Semitism is any criticism of Ben Shapiro, any criticism of genocide in Gaza, any criticism of Israel in general, an apartheid, the theocratic, anti-democratic regime, any criticism of all of that, if you make people think that criticism of that is anti-Semitism, which is not, then the real word anti-Semitism stops having any meaning, right? It's just everything. Any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. So Canary Mission makes anti-Semitism much worse because now saying something's anti-Semitic doesn't mean anything because they've gutted the term. They've made it meaningless. And I just want to make it quite clear that Canary Mission actually does the opposite of either what they think they're doing, or what their aim is doing. They are morally repulsive human beings who can witness a genocide and not just say nothing, but try and harm those who actually stand up against it. Just remarkably repulsive. Let's see. Paul Lozano wants to know, is a Jewish opinion voice more valuable than a Palestinian one? No. I don't even understand the question. Why would it be? Anyway. Okay. So I'm proud to say I've gotten to the point that I'm being attacked by these absolute trolls. I also wanted to play this clip just because it's kind of a cool clip. There are celebrities speaking out against the genocide, of course, as you know, some of them very well known, some of them less known, but this is the actor from Game of Thrones, Liam Cunningham, and oh, I see. Paul is trying to say that Palestinians' voices, sorry, I'll bring that up in a second. Palestinian voices are being centered more because Palestinian opinions matter more than Jewish ones, which is hilarious. Look at any number of stats of who gets quoted more, what coverage is done more. It is all pro-Israeli voices. It is to a insane extreme. Just the amount that our media is slanted towards pro-Israel voices is unbelievable, prior to October 7th and post October 7th. So the idea that Palestinian voices are being centered more, there was some analysis by Fairness and Accuracy Reporting, they do great work, about the number of pro-Palestine voices that like the Washington Post and New York Times have used over the years, over like decades. And it's almost non-existent. I think with the Washington Post, and we're talking over 20, 30 years, with the Washington Post, I think they found one pro-Palestine, actual Palestinian voice that Washington Post had ever printed their words, like other than, one sentence, like an actual opinion piece or article or anything. I think they found one over decades. So, of course, the idea is laughable. Anyway, so here is Liam Cunningham, and what he says is awesome, but also he's just got a great voice and accent. I don't know. Love that accent.
Under the occupation of the British, our next door neighbor.
Hold on, I'm going to restart it.
100 years under the occupation of the British, our next door neighbor. Probably the most powerful empire that the world has ever seen. And we didn't stop fighting. Every generation for 700 years, there was an attempt to remove the British and allow the Irish people who had our own culture, our own art, our own music, our own writing, our own literature. And we were denied that. They tried to destroy our language. They tried everything. But we would say, look, for the Palestinian people, look to the Irish, our tiny, small amount of people against the biggest empire, and we beat them. We got rid of them. Now, it took 700 years, but we finally got them. So it's inevitable that Irish people are going to have a huge amount of sympathy for the Palestinian people because they are going through what the Irish people went through.
Beautiful, beautiful words from Game of Thrones star Liam Cunningham. And yeah, it's a long march to justice. It's not quick. I did see in the chat that Paul is telling me that he meant Jewish voices are centered more. Yes, that may be true. I mean, that is true. That's exactly what I just said. Your quote said they're centered more, and for some reason I thought you meant the there was Palestinian. But anyway, doesn't matter. Still important thing to note on media coverage about Gaza. Okay, let's get to updates on Epstein. And I also want to say thanks for all your help, folks, subscribing my Substack. I am now number 34 on Substack's rising world politics leaderboard, global politics leaderboard. I'm number 34 in terms of growth on their Substack leaderboard there. Somehow I'm even above Drop Site News. I don't think that'll last long, but it's pretty cool. So if you want to help to increase my rise up the Substack leaderboard, because that's all that matters in life, please go over there and subscribe to my Substack. You can subscribe for free or a paid membership, but just go over there and do the free one, I assume. And it's substack.com/@RealLeeCamp. And let's tear up, let's blow up that Substack leaderboard. Let's get even higher than 34. Come on. Let's do it. And I've been publishing, for those of you who want another reason other than just helping me go up a little chart thingy, if you want another reason to subscribe over there for free, is I have been posting many columns, and sometimes I'll post older columns that are still timely, meaning sadly nothing's changed. So I'm sure there's plenty of those you haven't seen, but then mostly I've been posting new columns based on Unredacted Tonight. I post Unredacted Tonight clips. It's also a good way to follow me in case other stuff is suppressed and censored, like you subscribe on YouTube, but you never hear about my videos. Well, if you're subscribed on Substack as well, there's a much higher likelihood that you will find out about my videos. So substack.com/@RealLeeCamp. Please go over and do that for free. New episode coming out of Unredacted Tonight, coming out Thursday. And then I'm also working on an epic. You notice our language has to be epic. I can't just say I'm working on something good. I have to say I'm working on something legendary. I'm working on a legendary segment for Unredacted Tonight on the petrodollar, which we were just discussing with Charlotte Dennett. So, anyway, I appreciate all your help and all your support. Love you guys. All right, moving on to some tragic news. Here is the New York Times reporting of it. So we'll get deeper than the New York Times would ever dare to get. But Virginia, they say it's pronounced Giuffre. I've always said Giuffre, but if they say it's Giuffre, I guess so. Virginia Giuffre, voice in Epstein's sex trafficking scandal, dies at 41. And she was probably, I'd say, the most famous of the accusers of Epstein. Several of the accusers do not want their name out there, so they've remained somewhat anonymous. And then her and the other one, I think, is it Maria Farmer? But Giuffre was the one who was brought charges against Prince Andrew, which, of course, was the biggest news story in the world of like living people that had these accusations against them. Yes, we all know Bill Clinton flew on the Lolita Express 26 times or something, but no one was bringing charges against him. So the Prince Andrew thing was a massive story and continues to be. And anyway, Virginia Giuffre supposedly, according to mainstream media, took her life the other day. Virginia Giuffre, a victim of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking ring, who said she was passed around like a platter of fruit as a teenager to rich and powerful predators, including Prince Andrew of Britain, died on Friday at her farm in Western Australia. She was 41. She died by suicide, the New York Times says with definitive knowledge. According to a statement by the family, she wrote in an Instagram post in March that she was days away from dying of renal failure after being injured in an automobile crash with a school bus that she said was traveling nearly 70 miles per hour. So I think I mentioned that on the show when it happened. It was less than a month ago, I think. A school bus ran into her going 70 miles an hour and nearly killed her. She posted on Instagram that she was going to die in days, and I guess she survived. But now they're saying that she killed herself. So a school bus ran into her, and when that didn't work, she committed suicide. I'll let you try and make of this what you will. I know it is difficult to think that a family would ever have it wrong or say that something was a suicide when it wasn't. But you've got to remember what this family is facing. This family knows that she's a target, knows that people who bring out the truth on this topic are targets if they have firsthand knowledge. They know that, something suspicious happened to Jeffrey Epstein, didn't it? The FBI raided Jeffrey Epstein's mansion in New York City and his island. They left with trucks full of evidence against who knows, and nothing has ever come forward other than like names in his black book. But you can't say a name in his black book means that that person did anything. However, if you've got fucking videotapes from his mansion in New York, you could know a lot more. But for some odd reason, all of that evidence from the FBI is just, up in smoke. Who knows? Maybe they took a wrong turn as they were trying to get all that evidence up to Washington. Who knows what happened? So it doesn't actually shock me that a family would say, yeah, this was definitely suicide, if they want this thing to go away, if they don't want to be the center of this anymore. Just as a reminder, in case you really needed this, Jeffrey Epstein was found hanging in his cell. He had hanged himself with a paper jumpsuit or whatever, the thing they give to people on suicide watch in a jail cell in Manhattan. They take away your shoelaces and everything else so that you can't hang yourself. They have video cameras and they're supposed to check on him like every hour. The guards apparently were both taking naps at that time when he happened to kill himself. The prisoners nearby said they heard a lot of screaming because, people often just yell for help right as they're taking their own life. And the medical analysis that was done by an outside physician found that the bones that were broken in Epstein's neck were bones that sometimes break in hanging, but generally break in strangulation, because the type of hanging that breaks those neck bones, that's the type of hanging where you're dropped from a platform, where it's a really aggressive, harsh hanging, not the type of hanging where you are in a tiny cell and you lean against a rope or a shoelace. That's strangulation that is different. And so the odds of these bones breaking in his neck by a paper jumpsuit from a bunk bed, very low, incredibly low, unless he had brittle bone disease. Anyway, but the New York Times, your trusty source of information, will always tell you that Epstein killed himself. But here's one more fact about Virginia Giuffre. This is something that she tweeted out in 2019. She said, and I suppose it could always come out that this is faked, that this was not a tweet of hers, but everything I've heard is that this was real. But she said, I am making it publicly known that in no way, shape, or form am I suicidal. I have made this known to my therapist and GP. If something happens to me in the sake of my family, do not let this go away and help me to protect them. Too many evil people want to see me quieted. So she posted that in 2019. And furthermore, I feel like having posted that, having said she was going to die from this bus crash, and other things, I feel like if she were legitimately going to take her life, she probably would have posted something about it. I can't now obviously you can't know that for sure, and you can't know for sure that she didn't kill herself, at least at this time. But it seems unlikely that if she's posted things about how she would never kill herself and she's then making that choice, she might say something, but who knows? That's of course speculation. Anyway, boy, is this good for Prince Andrew. What a wonderful thing just happened for Prince Andrew. It's just so, it's lovely that this nice thing has happened for him, don't you think? It's really, I'm so happy. It must be such a relief for him that this has happened. Oh, by the way, his girlfriend, or I guess ex-girlfriend, she posted on Instagram that this was karma coming to get Virginia Giuffre because she was a liar or something like that. And of course, people were horrified that Prince Andrew's ex-girlfriend would post that. And she then took it down and said, people have pointed out that it wasn't very nice or something. It's like, oh, really? You think that didn't occur to you at the time? Okay, I want to bring you something Donald Trump has said real quick on Columbus Day. Donald Trump has said, I'm bringing Columbus Day back from the ashes. because we were all really upset about this. The Democrats did everything possible to destroy Christopher Columbus. Not the Democrats, no. His reputation and all the Italians that love him so much. They tore down his statues. Yeah, really. Cory Booker and Adam Schiff were tearing down the statues. Put up nothing but woke, or even worse, nothing at all. Well, you'll be happy to know Christopher is going to be making a major comeback. I am hereby reinstating Columbus Day under the same rules, dates, and locations as it has had for all of the many decades before. A few things. First of all, am I wrong that Columbus Day was still on the calendar? Did it? I know that there are certain localities that have replaced it with Indigenous Peoples Day, but federally it was still Columbus Day, wasn't it? So what exactly is he redoing or changing? It sounds like it was pretty much still there. Now, again, I maybe I missed something. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But let's also point out that localities can do whatever the hell they want, I would assume. Whether federally it's called Columbus Day or not, I don't think Trump can stop, Portland, Oregon from calling it Indigenous Peoples Day and having festivities for that. So I'm not exactly sure what this would change. But on top of that, let's remember some facts about Columbus. Columbus never arrived in the United States of America, okay? He landed in Hispaniola. He landed in, near Haiti and the Dominican Republic, etc. And he then proceeded to obliterate the natives he wrote in his own journals that you could easily subjugate these people, that they don't know enough about violence, that I held out a sword and they held the wrong end of it and cut themselves. He then enslaved many of them, and he brought many back to Spain, Italy. Well, no, he was sailing for Spain, but he's Italian. He brought many back, and many of them did not survive. The vast majority would not survive the trip. Many of them, of course, also died of disease. He was also, on top of all of that, just a terrible navigator. Not only did he land in, the Americas and call it India, and they knew within days that they had not landed in India. They quickly realized that, and they just kept calling it India because it, I think, made him feel like he had done the correct thing. But on top of that, he was a terrible navigator. He was still navigating. You can read actually accurate historical text on this. He was still often navigating by dead reckoning, which had been debunked or not debunked. They've just found better ways, far better ways. Dead reckoning was basically sticking a string in the water, seeing how fast you're going, judging by how far the string's dragging behind you, and then just feeling where you felt like you were. It just feels like I'm so-and-so. And so he was still doing that shit. Really had no idea where the hell he was going. Leaves an encampment in the Americas to, with the natives, but they treat the natives so poorly that the first encampment he leaves, the natives ultimately kill them or run them off, and they're never found. Then he goes, he demands a certain amount of gold from the natives. If they didn't, because he saw some gold necklaces, but they didn't have enough to supply what he wanted. But if they didn't bring gold, then he would cut off hands, cut off noses, etc. Just absolutely the worst piece of humanity you can imagine. And he was such a terrible leader and navigator that there was a mutiny that almost succeeded and almost meant that they would not stay there. But he was also heavily religious, so he believed God was helping him. He also was so certain that he was going to make a lot of money by going to, he thought to India, and then he didn't find India, but he found something else. And so he was certain there was going to be a lot of money there. And so he had to find ways to get a lot of money. Well, one was to bring back these exotic people and say, look at this wonderful exotic thing I found. Another was to try and get gold, but they couldn't find enough of it. And so he just kept, and literally Spain, despite them being horrific in other ways, they actually, like the Spanish monarchy told him not to, like, don't kill and enslave the native people. Like there's actually written notes of them saying, could you just not? I mean, I don't know if they cared that much, but they were like, just don't murder them all and like fucking rape and pillage. And he did anyway. Anyway, one of the most horrific human beings, but we're still celebrating Columbus Day, still talking about how awesome he is. And if you want to celebrate something Italian, if that's why you're into like Italian, pride and all that shit, then find another Italian. There are other Italians, you idiots. Find a new one. It doesn't need to be the genocidal maniac who didn't even know where he was going. It could be someone else. There are people in the chat. Please put in other Italians. Marissa Tomei, come on, put in other Italians that that people can have celebrations to rather than Christopher Columbus, please. Because apparently they need it. Apparently there are people like Donald Trump who think he's the only Italian who's ever lived. Okay, I'm going to wrap up. But a couple of quick notes. I have a new Unredacted Tonight coming out Thursday. I have another live stream Wednesday that I'd love for you to attend. Should be at 3 p.m. That's the one that changes time, but should be at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Also, if you haven't seen the first 9 episodes of Unredacted Tonight, if you want to catch up on some of the ones you missed, then it's leecamp.com/unredacted. And if you want to support this show, if you want to see this show and Unredacted Tonight keep going, please become a member at leecamp.net, which is my Locals page. Locals is a lot of fun to hang out at. A lot of amazing people there. Hello, everyone at Locals. You make the show possible. That's at leecamp.net. And you can also, if you hate Locals, you can also join up at patreon.com/leecamp. And just one more. Oh, and I should also tell you that Unredacted Tonight is now also a podcast. I'm putting it on my Just Comedy podcast. So if you want to listen to Unredacted Tonight, you can do that at Just Comedy. Look it up on your podcast platforms or go to linktree.com/leecamp. Okay, thanks so much, everybody. Keep fighting. The revolution will have laughter.
Well, brother, I salute you, though, man. You're one of the few that bring together this tremendous artistic talent and still be in such deep solidarity with oppressed people.
It's an honor to be here because I'll tell you, Lee, you have one of the funniest shows on television, bar none.
It's an enormous pleasure to be here. While I was waiting, I was leafing through your wonderful book.
The same to you. I love your show. Be happy to come back anytime.
Lee, this is one of the great honors of my long career, just to be in the same earth with you.
I'm sure.
We're just so blinded. We have so many blinders on because our society doesn't want us to know things. And so it takes shows like your show, and
it is clearly designed to eradicate.
Hey, good to see you.
Hey, Jill, how are you? Julian, thanks for joining me. Honor to have you, brother.
Consumerism is a theory that people should behave this way to help each other. It's not.
Mr. George Galloway, thank you so much for joining me in these dark times.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you so much, Lee, for having me on. Keep fighting. Ha ha.